Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our Friday panel on the toll summer storms are taking on Edmonton. But first, opening Alberta's online gaming market.
Gambling will never be safe, but there are ways to make it a little safer. And the way that you do that is you do things like you put in guardrails, such as time limits and spending limits and betting limits.
As of this week, the provincially regulated iGaming system is now live, making way for private sports betting companies and online casinos to operate in Alberta. As a result, the government expects to redirect more gambling revenue to the provincial coffers rather than see it flowing to grey or black market operators outside of Alberta. Joining us now, Dr. Robert Williams, a research coordinator with the Alberta Gambling Research Institute and a professor in the University of Lethbridge's Faculty of Health Sciences. Dr. Williams, hello, sir. Welcome to Alberta Primetime.
Thank you, and hello yourself.
All right, well, what's your read on Alberta's regulatory approach? Are there the guardrails needed for opening up the iGaming market in this manner?
Well, I understand why they did it. I mean, the degree of patronization of the Play Alberta site was not great. And so they've opted for the Ontario model, allowing in the commercial operators to capture more of that gray market. And to their credit, they have added in some important guardrails in terms of responsible gambling features, deposit limits, wager limits, a centralized self-exclusion system, and limits on advertising. But as pointed out, online gambling is inherently more risky than land-based gambling, and so it's still going to cause some harms.
Okay, well, and in that regard, you're a clinical psychologist, a professor in the University of Lethbridge's addictions counseling program. What will you be watching for where problem gambling, socioeconomic impacts might be concerned?
So, I mean, they're both going to be social impacts and economic impacts. And people are often missing the economic side of this. I mean, certainly the increased advertising that we saw in Ontario resulted in a significant increase in problem gambling amongst residents of Ontario. Now, Albertans have been habituated to that to some extent because we've been exposed to these ads for years. So I expect the impact here was a little more moderate than compared to Ontario. But there's some economic consequences that haven't been fully addressed, in that we're only capturing 20% of the online gambling revenue that these multinational companies will be collecting from Albertans. The problem is that the large majority of these companies are multinationals with headquarters outside of Ontario. And so a good portion of this money that actually will leave the country. So there's economic losses to the province of Alberta, even though the provincial government will see its coffers increase because of the 20%, but economic losses to Albertans more generally.
Okay, so does that mean the province might not be taking a big enough piece of the pie in how it collects this revenue into provincial coffers?
I would argue that's the case. I mean, Minister McNally pointed out, I don't totally agree with his figure of 70% of money being lost to outside operators. I think it's somewhat less than that. But even if that was true, then why lock it in at 80% loss? Because we're only collecting 20% of the revenues. So in many European jurisdictions, as well as North America, sometimes you see upwards of 50% or 60% of the revenue being kept by the jurisdiction. And I'd be a lot happier if that was the case here. There's not a whole lot of overhead expenses in transporting your website to a Canadian server. I mean, most of the money is actually being spent on advertising. So we're actually subsidizing all this omnipresent advertising that we're getting. So, yeah, I mean, I think a higher percentage would have been warranted.
Oh, okay, so and beyond that cash into provincial coffers, how much of an injection into Alberta's economy more generally do you see this representing?
Oh, it'll be pretty small potatoes. That overall gambling revenue, including land-based forms, are less than 2%, represent less than 2% of provincial revenues. So certainly online gambling is the up-and-comer in terms of revenues from gambling, but it's still going to be fairly small percentage, much less than 2%.
How likely is iGaming to take away market share from the physical presence of casinos currently here in the province, other venues, other avenues for gambling?
Theoretically, you would think it should, but there's been a lot of research showing that online gamblers are largely adding online activities on top of their land-based patronization. That being said, traditional land-based types of gambling, VLTs, lotteries, casinos, their revenues have stagnated and decreased by in inflation-adjusted dollars for several years. And you could argue that the advent of online gambling might be contributing to that, but the direct association is very, very weak. So I would rather characterize it as continued sort of stagnation and decline of land-based formats, including casino gambling, along with an increase in online gambling, but the two are not directly connected.
As you pointed out earlier as well, Alberta following in Ontario's footsteps on opening up to private companies, that province having entered the market 4 years ago. Are there lessons that we need to learn from that neighbor, 3 provinces to the east, in our approach?
Yeah, and I think we've actually learned some of those lessons. And so they didn't have a centralized self-exclusion system until very recently. And that's a problem. Self-exclusion is an important tool that gamblers can exclude themselves from all of the online sites as well as land-based sites in Alberta if they want to. That didn't happen in Ontario. So we've started that right off the bat. The responsible gambling measures that are put in place are actually good ones. So we've learned from some of Ontario's mistakes, for sure.
All right, sir. We'll have to leave it there for time. I appreciate your time this evening, Dr. Williams. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's Dr. Robert Williams, a research coordinator with the Alberta Gambling Research Institute and professor in the University of Lethbridge's Faculty of Health Sciences. From Edmonton's summer of storms to support for pipelines, Alberta's embrace of iGaming, and what to do about sick notes. Our Primetime This Week panel is in. And joining us this evening, social worker and community activist Karen Richards and Marty Chan, award-winning author, playwright, and writer. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with Edmonton's struggle to keep pace with an onslaught of summer storms, the latest of which flooded sections of the city's busy Yellowhead Trail, stranding motorists who had to be rescued by emergency crews. Overland flooding also found its way into neighborhoods, filling streets and backing up into basements. Edmonton's mayor says the intense storms are becoming more common, and the construction continues on a $1.6 billion flood mitigation program.
We knew that a 1 in 100 year flood 20 years ago is now a 1 in 20 year or 1 in 10 year flood. And so we've been down a path already, and I think this just reinforces why we need to finish that work. So the work started 7 years ago. It's got at least another 8 years to go.
And it's not just flooding taking a toll. Powerful winds during Wednesday's storm tore the roof off a Northside Junior High School.
My first thought would be like whoever's classroom this is, what sort of stuff's been damaged. And then of course, we're a few months away, but still coming up on the beginning of the school year. That's going to be a significant amount of work to try and fix before students are coming in fall.
Now, a storm 1 week ago also triggered flooding at Edmonton's TELUS World of Science, where significant damage has closed the popular attraction until November and forced the layoff of staff.
We rely on building admissions to cover 80% of our budget. So without those revenues coming in and without our building being open to the public, we simply can't sustain our usual staffing load. So we made the very difficult decision today to lay off 147 staff members at the Science Centre temporarily, but that represents about 68% of our workforce.
And anyone who paid for camps, programs, IMAX shows and events will be contacted about refunds. Karen, as an Edmonton resident, how are you reflecting on all the storm activity that continues to pass through the capital region and the multitude of challenges coming with it?
I think it has been very difficult for a lot of people, but I think it also really made me recognize how much we are a bit isolated in our little corners of the city. Last Friday, during one of the storms in our Southside neighborhood, I didn't know that it rained really at all, but then we drove to the West End and streets were closed, things were happening, police were directing people. And so again, I think it really just shows we don't necessarily know what's going on all around the city until it actually impacts us. But I think that the city of Edmonton, the Mayor Nack had talked about flood mitigation strategy, which is really great. And what's neat is EPCOR, so it's municipally owned, actually got an award in 2021 for what they called a Clean 50 award. And it had to do with the flood mitigation strategy, where they actually are connecting with community and using private land ownership and green spaces to try and mitigate floods. So I think there's lots more work to be done. Even as Mayor Nack said, there's another 8 years or so in that plan. But there is already work that's happening here to try and help that out. There's so many residents who are really struggling with wet basements, unfortunately.
Marty, what do you think should be the takeaway from this summer's onslaught of storms? And is it garnering maybe the attention warranted?
Simply put, we are in the find out phase of F around with climate change. This is not once in 100 years, not once in 20, not even once in 10. It's one every other year. If you think about the kind of deluge that Edmonton has experienced, I know certainly as a homeowner, I've gotten my steps in running between my basement to see if it was flooded and outside to see if my eaves troughs were running clean. But if you think about it, last year, the Calgary got hit with the hailstorms, and we think about the wildfires in Banff. These kinds of extreme weather events are going to continue with more frequency. We can't predict which regions are going to be hit, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be hit with something that's, we're going to overuse this word over the next 10 years, but we're going to see a lot of unprecedented weather events, including like this year, we're talking about, I think we're up to 23 tornadoes touching down when last year we had 15. So if you think this is going to just go away, you're sadly mistaken. And if you're one of those deniers who says, well, look, it's a sunny day, we should be fine, I would advise you to take a look at the insurance premiums for homeowners in Alberta. It is risen significantly because a lot of the weather events have hit Alberta specifically, and we've gone up in the last 5 years. I believe we're at 55% hikes in insurance premiums compared to the national average of 38%. So it's hitting us in the pocketbook, and I fear that our insurance rates are going to rise as quickly as the water is in Edmonton.
All right. Next up, the prospect of more pipelines out of our province has certainly been front and center this month, and that appears to be catching the attention of more than just Albertans. A Angus Reid poll suggests 63% of Canadians support a new pipeline to the West Coast, and 55% give the thumbs up to another line to Ontario. Welcome news in Bruderheim, a town nestled in Alberta's industrial heartland, starting point for the proposed line heading west.
Alberta needs more pipeline. We need to send more oil and gas to the Asian market. Yeah, we need another market instead of USA.
Some, though, remain hesitant after the proposed Keystone and Northern Gateway pipelines failed to materialize.
I wait to see what happens. Don't jump the gun. don't speculate just in case.
At the Bruderheim town office, there is cautious optimism.
We had a presentation from a group about this pipeline, so we don't look at it until it gets a little more teeth to it. There's a lot of hurdles to jump over.
If the pipeline does become a reality, it could bring more residents, more businesses to the bedroom community of 1,400. Marty, what's to be made of poll results signaling a majority of Canadians support a new BC pipeline?
I think it's probably a backlash against the former Trudeau government, which was really hardcore in terms of carbon tax and trying to limit greenhouse gas releases. And I think seeing a prime minister who might be more open to business has given a lot of Canadians that confidence that maybe they can move forward with something like this. But I would probably rip a page out of some of the people who are interviewed in Bruderheim who have probably sort of are experiencing Lucy Van Pelt, Charlie Brown syndrome with the football that always gets pulled away at the last minute. I think they know that there are a lot of hurdles and a lot of things can change between now and when the shovels may or may not hit the ground.
Karen, to what degree do you see that pipeline support reflecting changing political dynamics around the federal-provincial relationship?
I think that those relationships are definitely based on mutual economic benefit. And as Marty noted, a bit of backlash, I guess, against what has previously happened. So when you have a prime minister now who is more business-minded, economically focused, it makes sense that there is more alignment and or mutual economic benefit with a province like Alberta. But I do think it's important to remember that those sentiments can shift so easily, and they already did. And I think it has a lot to do actually with global tensions that have risen. So I think that Canadians are a little bit more likely to support things that maybe they didn't before. Because if you think of it like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people aren't into virtue or virtue signaling maybe as much, or those existential identity crises of environmentalism when they feel that their safety needs are actually being threatened. So I think that that's some place that they're coming together, and we'll see how long that lasts.
All right. Time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, the changing face of Alberta's iGaming marketplace and the debate over what to do with sick notes. More from our Primetime This Week panel in a moment. Welcome back. Online gambling entering a whole new era in our province this week. Along with government-run Play Alberta, private companies can now get in on the action through the iGaming marketplace, regulated by the AGLC. And in order to operate in Alberta, platforms must offer users responsible gaming tools and intervene when they notice problematic gambling behavior. They're also not allowed to target children with ads.
What are the shows that we're putting our advertising on, for digital marketing, making sure that we have the appropriate restrictions on age.
Now, this gambling researcher says despite having many of the same protections, Ontario has seen a problematic rise in gambling addiction in underage betting.
So we see an increase amongst youth who are not legal to gamble but are actually engaging in online sites.
Online gambling should be fun. It's a form of entertainment, not seen as an opportunity to make money.
That said, the province stands to make $76 million annually from taxing online gambling. 1% will be set aside for problem gambling programs and treatments, and another 2% for First Nations.
For all of those individuals that are struggling, treatment will be free of charge and it'll be paid for by the operators.
So far, more than 20 platforms have signed up to operate in Alberta. Karen, what's your takeaway from how Alberta's iGaming domain is changing with the entry now of private companies? How does the government come off here?
Well, it's very interesting. I think that for decades and decades, the government of Alberta, as well as all the residents really in Alberta, have benefited from the avails of gambling because we have AGLC and the charitable gaming model. What's interesting is last year in 2025, the government of Alberta into their general revenues made about $2.2 billion from AGLC, which includes the gambling money. That's not the whole gambling amount. But they're estimating to get another, you talked about 76 million in terms of taxes, but also 337 million from that 20% that they're going to be taking from these corporations. Those corporations, though, are going to get $1.7 billion. So I think there's a lot of money to be made. And I'll tell you, with iGaming, none of that is going to be going to charities or nonprofit organizations. And the advertising is so much, they're literally outside of casinos and at the malls. If you're not targeting children, but you're where children actually are or playing on the radio, there's a lot of money to be made. And that's both by the government and the operators, but not necessarily by residents in this case.
Marty, what do you make of the protections being put in place?
I appreciate that they were taking some of the lessons learned from what Ontario was doing and trying to protect the online gamblers. But let's be honest here. This is a Conservative government saying we're open for business. We'll think about the consequences later if somebody brings them up. And to be honest with you, I think they should have ripped a page out of Donald Trump's playbook with the Investor Bridge and just said, you want our market 50%. This 20% off of the revenue just seems like a paltry amount. It's the sort of equivalent of Oliver Twist saying, please more, please sir, may I have more? When really this is something where they want access to our marketplace, they should pay for it, especially considering that Alberta's economy doesn't really benefit from this because these are companies that are operating outside of the province. So we're not going to build anything locally in terms of the impact.
All right, one more quick topic for us. That's the shifting requirements for sick notes. Case in point, Germany, the government there previously complained about absenteeism, and so to improve productivity, it's requiring a doctor's note on the very first day of illness, a move business experts disagree with.
I think there's a fundamental mistake when we equate time at work with productivity. You can go to work and be entirely unproductive.
Manitoba recently passed a bill preventing employers from asking for sick notes unless an employee has been absent for more than a week. In Saskatchewan, BC, and Nova Scotia, it's more than 5 days, 3 in PEI and Ontario. And Alberta does not have any restrictions in place.
We're all adults, so if I'm phoning in sick, it's because I cannot be at work today, whether it's mental sickness or a cold.
The Canadian Medical Association has been advocating for years to eliminate doctor's notes for short-term illness. Okay, Marty, where do you weigh in on regulations around sick notes?
I can't answer that question. I'm sick. See, that's my sick note. I think it's a little ridiculous to ask somebody to go to the doctor to get a sick note for 1 or 2 days. We should have an honor system, especially considering the healthcare system being under fire right now. The last thing I want is a physician to spend time writing out a sick note for somebody. I think their time could be better served actually taking care of people as opposed to writing notes.
All right, Karen, you get last word on this one. Where do you weigh in?
Yeah, it kind of makes me sick, for sure, to think that they would do something like that. I think that if you have a problem with an employee and their absenteeism, then you as a manager should address that. I'm not surprised that Alberta kind of doesn't really have legislation on this, because I think they generally, unless it's like health sciences or social services or education, they don't want too much government overreach. But hopefully they're not going to mandate something like this, because I think it's pretty wild.
All right, we're out of time. Have to leave it there. Thank you both. Hope you have an awesome weekend.
Take care.
Thank you.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News. It's about bike lanes, an issue our politics panel touched on this week. Tensions flared Thursday when Transportation Minister Devin Dreeshen met with concerned Edmontonians after the province launched the bike lane complaints portal. Michael says people's basements are being flooded, and what does City Council worry about bike lanes. One of our alleys is full of potholes and the city of Edmonton doesn't have time to fill them. Contemporary home audio isn't in the province's corner writing. UCP complains about Ottawa interfering in provincial matters, and then it pulls this stunt. According to Chad, all those cyclists that want this should have to register and have insurance on their bike like any other vehicle on the roadway. CVN asks, why not just make the sidewalks wider? And Trish wants all points of view respected, writing, we need infrastructure for all. Remember, you can always have a say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. That is our program for tonight. Have a great evening and a great weekend, everyone. From all of us at Alberta Primetime, thank you for watching and join us again next time.